Good evening and welcome to Resilient Houston, Documenting Hurricane Harvey, a panel discussion marking the launch of the latest issue of Houston History magazine. I'm Dr. Monica Perales, Associate Professor of History and Director of the Center for Public History here at UH. Although we wish that could be with you in person, we are happy that you have chosen to join us tonight for what is sure to be an interesting conversation. At the Center for Public History, our mission is to ignite an understanding of our diverse pasts by collaborating with and training historically minded students, practitioners, and the public through community-driven programming and scholarship. Since 1984, we have created collaborative research projects with university and community partners to generate research that is local and global. As public historians, we're committed to doing history for and with the communities of which we are a part. We do this in three ways. First, we train graduate and undergraduate students in public history methods, values, and ethics, and prepare them for a variety of careers in the public humanities. Second, through public-facing projects like Houston History magazine, scholars, students, and community members work together to document our rich community histories. And third, through public programming under the CPH lecture series, we strive to make history matter in Houston by sponsoring lectures, workshops, discussions, and seminars that speak to the value of the humanities in the professions and in the public. We're delighted to mark the publication of the latest issue of Houston History magazine, which is the culmination of our 3-year major oral history project, Resilient Houston. In 2017, we experienced one of the worst flooding events in Houston's history. As we watched the devastation brought by Hurricane Harvey, we knew that as public historians, we had a responsibility to document this event as it unfolded, to record the experiences of first responders, survivors, and volunteers, and ensure that these stories would not be forgotten. Building on more than 20 years of oral history experience, we started Resilient Houston, an initiative that brought together UH faculty, students, staff, and community members to do this vital work. These stories, some of which will be shared tonight, have been gathered into an archive and website project and form the heart of this issue of Houston history. This project could not have been possible without the hard work and support of so many along the way. A special thank you, of course, to all of the people who entrusted us with their stories. We're grateful for all that we learned from you. Thank you also to all of our community partners who helped us along the way by hosting oral history gathering events and sharing events. Thank you to all of the students who participated in this project through classes, internships, and volunteer opportunities, and to the members of the Resilient Houston team, Debbie Harwell, Mark Goldberg, Todd Romero, Julie Cohn, and Sheridan Schwartz. Debbie Harwell is also the editor of Houston History, and I want to give a special acknowledgement to her. This issue is amazing and is a testament to her commitment to student mentoring and to preserving Houston's history. We are so proud of all the work that you do, Debbie. A few more thank yous are in order. Resilient Houston and this special issue of Houston History magazine were made possible by grants from Humanities Texas, the Center for History and Culture of Southeast Texas and the Upper Gulf Coast at Lamar University, the Southern Jewish Historical Society, the Texas Jewish Historical Society, the UH Office of the Provost Cougar Initiative to Engage program, and the Summerlee Foundation. We are also deeply grateful to the UH College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, and especially Dr. Antonio D. Tillis for his ongoing support of the magazine and CPH and our mission to make history matter in Houston. At CPH and Houston History magazine, we rely on the generous support of people like you who are equally committed to keeping Houston's history alive and supporting our mission of helping students succeed. If you like what you see this evening, you can support us by subscribing to Houston History magazine or donating to support our work. To learn more, please visit us at houstonhistorymagazine.org. You can also find us on social media. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at UHCPHistory and at HughHist Magazine. We encourage you to share your own stories on social media using the hashtags Resilience at Work and Resilient Houston. For tonight's discussion, We encourage you to add your questions for our panelists in the chat box in the live stream at any time. These will be shared in the Q&A portion of the event. This box is located on the right side of the streaming frame. And now, without further ado, allow me to turn the Zoom over to Dr. Debbie Harwell, editor of Houston History Magazine, who will introduce our panelists tonight.
Thank you, Monica. Houston History is published twice a year by the Center for Public History. And every time a new magazine comes out, we host an event to launch that issue. This is our first ever virtual launch, so we appreciate you being here for us to discuss Hurricane Harvey, which was truly a storm of historic proportions. 3 of us in the center taught classes related to Harvey using oral history. Dr. Mark Goldberg, Assistant Professor of History and Associate Professor of History and Director of Jewish Studies, focused on Meyerland and the Jewish community with his graduate students. Dr. Todd Romero, Associate Professor of History and Associate Dean, taught a capstone class for history majors. And I taught an honors class in which students conducted oral histories and created a website, which is the Resilient Houston Documenting Hurricane Harvey website, which uses clips from their interviews to help tell the Harvey story. The project's culmination came with a special issue of Houston History Magazine, marking the storm's 3rd anniversary. Students in my history writing and editing class took the over 90 interviews that we had conducted amongst all of our classes and coupled those with their additional research in order to write the articles that appear in this magazine. So I'd like to introduce the participants for this evening. All of them took part in the Resilient Houston project. Eric Dowding and Trang Phan are Braeburn residents whose Southwest Houston home flooded Memorial Day 2015, Tax Day 2016, and during Hurricane Harvey. They are still living with studs for walls while they're waiting to rebuild their home. Both work at UH. Trang is an assistant dean in the College of Architecture, and Eric works in graphic design, including on this magazine before it went to print. James Joseph, a longtime Houstonian, is a 5th Ward resident and Civic Club president. During Harvey, he helped conduct rescues of neighbors, even as his own home was being damaged by the falling rain. He especially tried to help senior citizens and those with medical issues, addressing the need for food and shelter, dealing with FEMA, and the disparities faced in their income in their neighborhood, as well as other low-income neighborhoods. Rabbi Renon Teller is the leader of Congregation Bris Shalom in Bel Air. He assisted congregants and Meyerland residents, many of whom had flooded 3 times in 3 years, impacting not only their families, but their community institutions as well. He also opened the doors to Bris Shalom to take in Congregation Beth Yeshurun, which had flooded badly. And this gave Beth Yeshurun's congregants a place to gather and worship. Samantha De Leon, a recent UH history graduate and freelance writer, participated in all phases of the Resilient Houston project. She conducted several of the interviews. She wrote the opening article on forecasting Harvey. And additionally, she interned with us through the Cougar Initiative to Engage grant to finalize the magazine for print. And she plans to attend graduate school in the fall. David Guzman, who is a PhD student in history at UH and who served as associate editor of this magazine, will monitor the chat for us this evening and pose as many of your questions as possible to the panelists before we close. So with those introductions, I would like to start with our questions. And first we're gonna look at the pre-Harvey experience and during the storm, then we'll go to personal impact after the storm. So I'd like to begin with you, Eric, if you could, please. Tell us about your home's history with flooding going back to 2015 and what in the world you were thinking when you heard Harvey was coming our way.
Well, we've been lucky enough to avoid flooding until 2015. When we bought the house, we had been told that there was no chance of it flooding. We're next to the bayou and it flows very nicely, and rest assured, no flooding. So that brought in the first flood in 2015, which was a bit of a surprise. And basically we learned that everything was more or less destroyed inside the house and we had to empty everything out. We rebuilt a year later. We were flooded again, this time with tax day flood. So we made the best of a nice new house for about 10 months. And then after tax day, we went through the same process of rebuilding again. And when Harvey came, well, until it happens, you can stay optimistic and think that the storm will go over or it will not be too bad. It turned out it was the worst of the three. Importantly, we were not impacted to the point of many other residents and many other districts and areas in Houston. We got 2 feet of water, which is considerable, but many other people, even very close to us, were flooded up to 5 or 6 feet. So that is a completely different ballpark, because we spend the night on our kitchen counters, whereas when you're flooded 6 feet, you can't even do that.
Right.
And then, well, you just got to try and push your way through it. So we ended up, we helped some neighbors that were elderly next door who had medical issues, and we went to get them on our Sunday morning, and we spent the Sunday on the roof. After that, well, it was just a question of emptying everything out and trying to get back to normal as quickly as possible, which does take a long time.
Right, right. Trang, how were you feeling in anticipation of Harvey? And what kind of things did you do to prepare or plan for a place of refuge?
So having flooded twice already, we of course took precautions, and we didn't take the first 2 floods. We put everything up. I packed everything in tubs, only to find out that with 2 feet of water, you kind of succumb to it, and everything that I had packed away floated around the house.
Oh, no.
So all of that preparation was for naught, more or less, because it toppled over.
Yeah, the tubs tip over.
But mentally, I don't know if you can prepare for these things. I look at it from a mindset of gratitude, and that might sound odd for some people, but if in my family, if anyone had to flood, I would prefer it was us rather than my parents, for example, who would not have fared well. My siblings who had young children, I don't think they would have fared very well either. And so all things considered, if it had to happen to anyone, we assumed that, and we were okay.
James.
Yes.
How about you? What were your thoughts before Harvey arrived? And as the storm hit, what sorts of things were you doing to help other people?
Well, I live in the Fifth Ward community, which was developed back in 1866 in Frenchtown, right after slavery. So my community is a very historic community, and the homes here in the community some are still here. Actually, the home that I still live in today was built in 1932. So it's when the storm came, of course, I live in a historically Black community. The income is very low, under $25,000 a year, and the literacy rate is only like 34%. So the lack of knowledge when things of this nature come through before Harvey has already been devastating. The education about insurance, you can't get insurance. And if you've had used FEMA before, you can't use it again if you didn't already have insurance. So now here comes Hurricane Harvey. All already through our disparities, you know. So Hurricane Harvey hit, and I've been a community leader here in the Fifth Ward community for over 15 years now, going through all the devastations with my community. So I received a lot of calls when Hurricane Harvey hit. My personal home roof caved in, but I negated that and went out and helped other residents. Because I'm a civic club leader, and I was getting calls from my senior citizens who I knew had cancer, who I knew had hypertension, who I knew was dealing with lupus and other situations. So I have a truck, so I loaded up my truck and I called some of my boys, you know, and I said, hey, you know, we got some seniors over here who need our help, so let's go. So we managed to do that. A couple of organizations that I'm a part of. I was able to galvanize groups of guys and gals, and on that day, you know, just rushing out, and our phone services were not adequate in the neighborhood, so we were using social media a lot. We used I was getting calls, you know, messages from Facebook messages saying, "Hey Joseph, my grandmother is at such and such address. Could you go pick her up?" And you know, we would try to reply, and we had some of the ladies helping us coordinate the calls, but we did the best we could with what we had, you know, at the time. But people lost furniture, you know, they lost their rugs, they lost their clothing, you know, carpet, appliances, you know, and some people lost heirlooms that had been in families. Like I said, my home had been here since 1932. When I moved in, there were some heirlooms still here from way, way, way back. So I can imagine some of the residents who we went in their homes even after the aftermath to clean up and muck, you know, those houses and get out some of those drywalls. They lost a lot of memorabilia. They lost a lot of pictures, and a lot of them feel like they just lost life, you know, during that time of devastation in a community that had already been totally devastated before the hurricane come through. So I tried to do my part as much as I could, you know, with the resources that I had, and that was the other issue that we had. We didn't have the resources readily available to communities such as mine, you know, here in the Fifth Ward. You know, some of the other neighborhoods received much faster service, you know, than we did, adequately faster service than some of the residents in these neighborhoods. Some of the senior citizens had to wade in the water for 2 or 3 days before they got rescued. It was just a travesty to see my senior citizens in that situation, you know, already devastated with half their clothes on, you know, at the front door. You know, wouldn't want to see a young man like myself seeing them like that, but in that time of need, you know, it was just the kind of situation that we were in.
Mm-hmm. But before I go to Rabbi Teller, I just want to double check. Did most of your neighborhood also flood in Allison?
Yes, it also flooded.
So these were people who had also had repeated flooding events.
And that's one of the reasons they couldn't get the FEMA, because if they used the FEMA during that hurricane and they didn't have insurance for this next hurricane, they couldn't get any funding at all. Okay. And we have like 2 bayous in the community. We have Hall's Bayou and another bayou in the community that the banks just went totally over, with homes just feet from those bayous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rabbi Teller, Harvey, as I understand from your interview, was your first hurricane to actually be here in Houston. Could you tell us about your experience preparing for the storm, including your decision not to hold services with Shalom, and also what you did to kind of protect your family and neighbors nearby?
Yeah. So I arrived in Houston in 2005, and hearing stories of Allison in our community, of, you know, the streets filled. And so we knew it was an issue. We were blessed to find a new home when we moved here that was built to flood codes, and not knowing anything about it. And then when the floods started hitting, Bel Air wasn't really affected as much as the rest of the community. Particularly, I talk about the community, the general Houston community, but also the Jewish community. There's part of the Jewish community that lives in Meyerland that was hit terribly 3 times in a row, houses and synagogues just completely destroyed. And so I was familiar with the impact of these hurricanes, having been inside of these homes just after the hurricanes, helping people muck out all the stuff. And so when it came time to prepare for this hurricane, I asked my family and my wife, like, why, for the first one, for Rita, we had left to Austin. We had friends in Austin. And so we sort of battened down the hatches at the synagogue and put the Torahs in a safe place and evacuated. But for this one, we stayed. I don't know why, but I was glad I did. Because we were blessed to have our home did not flood. We were ready for it to flood. We picked up all the furniture off the first floor and put it up. And so we were prepared to take in water on our first floor. Luckily, we had a second floor. So as the rain started coming, we realized very quickly that our neighbors' homes were lower than our home. And it was, there was this many emotions, right? So I saw some of our panelists, started, the impact of the emotion is close still. And the emotions of needing to save people, wanting to help people. And so as the water started to fall, the neighbors on each side of our homes started to flood. And so we went out and gathered their stuff and helped them come over to either side of our home. And so very quickly, we realized there was a serious obligation and responsibility for those who haven't flooded, need to help those who had flooded. And so that's when we immediately went into action and gathered neighbors. And when the rains stopped falling, we went into action, and that was the call to arms. All those who had not flooded needed to help those who flooded. And so our synagogue also flooded a little bit, but some of the areas, synagogues flooded very badly. And so we reached out to local synagogues and Jewish institutions and invited them to use our space. And so for the next several months, we were blessed to be able to be on the helping side of things. And so in our home that night, it was us. We're a family of 6, so we invited a family of 3, including a child with special needs and dogs and some elderly folks. And it was a sanctuary from the storm.
That's nice. And I think we have seen a lot of people helping other people in neighborhoods that we don't always see on a daily basis. And that was one maybe silver lining, I guess, for Harvey, if we could call it that. So I'd like to turn our discussion to after the storm hit, and we touched on that a little bit, but I want to go to it with a few other questions. And Trang, I want to start with you. Recovering from floods is something none of us want to be an expert at doing, but you, out of necessity, have had to become an expert, whether you like it or not. So I want to know a little bit about how you feel this repeated flooding has impacted you personally, especially when you hear a storm is coming or we're going to have a heavy rain. And does it impact the way you look at recovery, thinking about the aftermath?
Yeah, I think that I'm much more attuned to the weather now than I've ever been before. When weather alerts, prior to flooding 3 times now, and especially before Harvey, I was not that aware or mindful of weather alerts, I have to be honest, but now I'm constantly on the phone looking at radar patterns. It gets to the point where, you know, you just don't know if is it this time, you know, we're gonna flood again. The other thing is I've grown to be more organized than I've ever been in terms of recovery. I mean, I have a book, I kept a journal of everything that happened. And, you know, to Mr. Joseph's point, navigating FEMA is not easy. And I don't think that that is something that people realize. Navigating the recovery process for people who don't have access to the internet or don't have phones that are readily available. These are things that we take for granted. And these are things that we don't realize so many other thousands of people struggle with. So for me, the recovery has been a moment of reflection on how lucky we are in spite of the unfortunate circumstance we might find ourselves in. We're still very lucky in many other ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, some of the internet, even the use of computers. When Katrina hit, a lot of people had only just begun to become comfortable with computers. And that was one of the things that we saw in the aftermath of that storm. And James mentioned social media. Harvey is the first storm we've had in our region where we had access to social media. And so those things are sort of changing how we approach and how we look at storms, which is it's really interesting that both of you mentioned that. Eric, you mentioned in your interview that your first flood, thanks to flood insurance, that you basically got a new house. And so you did that twice, but this time you're living with studs covered in plastic for walls. And so what's your long-term plan for recovery this time?
Well, the reasoning is that one flood, two floods is coincidence. A third time is a pattern. And there really is no reason to believe that there won't be another flood. I think that, you know, global warming, more construction upstream, the bayou is, even if they've widened the Braeburn Bayou a little bit, it will probably happen again. We've seen some strong rains even since Harvey that were coming very close to the doorstep. Mm-hmm. So you don't spend a very good night then. So yes, the reasoning is we're not going to rebuild the house again to have it destroyed within a few months, although we've still had 2 years respite. We're going to build up. We're going to pull the house down and build a house elevated on piers and just live one floor off the ground. And then we can dock as many boats as we want.
Well, hopefully you won't. Hopefully your boats will end up all on dry land.
Yeah. But again, and to come to the point of looking after the neighbors, we will probably be welcoming neighbors. If ours is one, our neighbor has already built up, so we'll be 2 houses that will be dry, flood proof, basically. And we will be able to be a bit of a haven, we hope. You know, it's not something that you wish for, but we've seen all the houses and all the neighborhoods around that have been destroyed. So that's the reasoning.
Just out of curiosity, have most of the people come back to your neighborhood?
Lots of houses have stayed. Well, house is not very livable for quite a few months afterwards, and then a lot of houses have not been reoccupied or have been renovated very quickly and become rental houses or flip houses. So there is a change in the neighborhood. There's a change of feeling. It used to be a little community of people who had lived there for a long time, and now there are lots more renters, which is not a bad thing, but it has changed the physiognomy of the neighborhood.
Rabbi Teller, you mentioned before about, of course, that many people in Meyerland and members of the Jewish community were flooded, 3 times in 3 years. Could you talk a little bit more please, about what you all have done at Bridge Shalom to support the community, as well as some of the other things, especially for other community institutions, and how the Jewish community has managed to persevere through these tough times.
Yeah. Immediately after the storm, we started organizing to the principle that we learned during the storm of those who didn't flood and helping those who did. And we just simply made a Excel spreadsheet of all our members and people that we knew in the neighborhood that had been affected that need help. And then we had another column of people who are willing to step up and help. And luckily, they're on our spreadsheet, they're approximately the same. And so we went about gathering supplies and resources to match the two together. And so we were really matchmaking for people who were willing to help and people who needed help. And it was really just a beautiful thing to witness. And I'm so grateful to be able to reflect on that today, just personally, so that that feeling doesn't get lost, so that we carry this tradition and insight and wisdom with us. And I think it has more general and universal application, absolutely, for future floods. We're more prepared and ready and willing and understand the depth of the loss. But also we hope that that wisdom will spread into all parts of our community, so that we can begin to be more civic-minded, more helpful, and just the panel tonight, just to be able to unite and be able to help each other when we need it.
I'm curious to know, do you find that people in your community are willing to talk about their Harvey experiences, or do they try to just kind of back away from it and think, I've had enough?
B, yes. I think with that kind of scarring and tragedy, right, it's hard to return back to that place. And so that's another reason I'm grateful for both the documentation and the archive and the program, because I think you're right. There is a tendency to move on unless you have the physical reminders that you have around you. It's sometimes it's I think human nature to address the next tragedy. Right, and it's even strange that we're talking about flooding during the pandemic, right? But if we can learn these lessons and apply them to the lives that we lead, I think a great thing will be happening here.
I wonder if maybe Harvey helps us be more empathetic for the pandemic.
I hope so. I
Perhaps.
hope so.
Yeah. James, as a community leader, as you've mentioned about how much you did working with the people in your community in Fifth Ward, especially the senior citizens who have been through repeated flooding. And I know this is a passionate topic of yours. Could you tell us a bit about the kinds of challenges that, in more detail, that you face in your neighborhood, and the difficulties in getting help that perhaps are not seen in some of the other neighborhoods around Houston?
You know, and as I was listening to the rabbi and I was listening to Eric, they both mentioned that they were, well, people in their communities, and some of the communities have changed and they were able to move out and, you know, things of that nature. But in my community, we had to stay within those devastations. We couldn't rent hotels. We couldn't move with relatives. We didn't have those resources. We don't have those resources available to us in those situations. Even myself, you know, helping other people and wanting to be close to the residents, you know, I even had to stay in my home, you know, in that time of devastation. You know, many homes that I went to, they had holes in the roofs, you know, but Mama Johnson was still there, you know, each and every day, trying to make the most of it, praying every morning, you know, and trying to cook a meal, to eat. So the disparities, are like I said, even before Harvey were great, but during Harvey, it was just devastating because people couldn't get out and help as much as they would like because the roads, were all messed up and, furniture everywhere. But we just don't have and didn't have the resources. I've been trying myself through a nonprofit that I work with, trying to gather resources even to this day. Some of the residents even to this day have not gained. I lost the business. I didn't care about it, but I lost the business personally during Harvey, and I haven't bounced back yet. Thank God, he's in my life and he controls everything and moves everything forward for me. But there's a lot of people who lost things and just not able to bounce back, and they just don't have the hope and faith, within them. So, I'm also a minister at my church, associate pastor. So I come in and help out, where I can in my church, and we're still feeding people. Every other weekend, we're feeding people. Even now, we were doing it then through the food bank, but we had to continue on through Harvey, because people are devastated. And yes, we are on food stamps, we're on Medicaid, but evidently, in the fourth largest city in the United States, something is not working.
Mhm.
Something is not working.
I was wondering also, in the news the last few days, they've had more information come out on the incidence of childhood leukemia in Kashmir Gardens. And I was
Yes.
wondering if there was any impact from Harvey on that creosote waste area.
And it was because of the flooding. Actually, I was on the conference call earlier with the county commissioners, and we were discussing those issues. And when the flooding, well, the creosote sets in the ground, but when it floods, all of that stuff comes up. So when it did flood, those incidents were intensified. And I can say, and I'm just saying this right now as I can speak, Hurricane Harvey probably influenced more of the creosote situation to come afloat now today. Now that I think about it, because the way that those things in the studies we've studied, how the creosote comes up, well, it does through water. And Hurricane Harvey had a lot of water. So yeah, those things came in and they came into our homes. It allowed those creosotes to come into our home. Leukemia is at a high rate. The state has now deemed the Fifth Ward and Kashmir area as a creosote cluster. So Hurricane Harvey had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. I wondered about that. Well, I want to change our focus for a few minutes and give Samantha De Leon an opportunity to join in the conversation and talk a bit about the Resilient Houston project. So Sam, first I'd like you to tell everyone the story that of course I've heard about where you were when you first became aware of Harvey and what you thought about the storm at that moment.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a different experience finding out about Harvey. I was a student. I think I was a sophomore, and I just moved into my dorm, and I really needed a shoe rack. So I decided to go to Walmart, and this was the Monday before Harvey hit, and I was just floored at how many people were there. And I was just so shocked just to see so many people there, like early afternoon in the middle of the week. Just, food was already being taken, water bottles were gone, and I found out in line that there was a storm in the Gulf, and I felt annoyed because I was a child of Rita. My parents were the ones that went and evacuated from that storm, and we got caught on the way to San Antonio. And so, in my experience, I had heard so many different or I'd heard a lot of exaggerations about storms. So I kind of had that mentality going in about Harvey, and it definitely defied expectations. I think this time they were right 100%. I remember just hearing everything on the news once I, had gone to Walmart and I went home, and I thought that it was going to be kind of like a Rita situation where everyone was freaking out and it was going to be nothing. And I was really, really, really wrong.
So when you were in Dr. Romero's class, you got to conduct interviews and or oral histories for people who were impacted by this storm that turned out to be very real. And tell us a bit about what that experience was like and what it meant to you.
It was really humbling. I went to a few oral history harvests where we went to different areas like churches and got to talk to some of the people there. And you kind of just put it in the back of your mind when you're not involved in this type of work. The water's gone, the storm was 3 years ago. You would think that, there isn't more to tell. And just to hear, these people's stories directly from their mouths, you're talking to a primary resource or primary source. And it's just, it's very moving. It makes you want to do more. I remember hearing Alvina Randolph's story. She was the first person that I interviewed, and I was just so shocked at how much that she had to say and how she still hadn't recovered, and it had been 2 years at that point. And I was just so shocked. And it kind of that feeling of shock, and I need to get more people to tell their stories. I went to every single oral history harvest, and I got really caught up in the work, as you can tell. But it really just makes you want to do more. And the best that I could do was to tell these people's stories. So it was really moving.
So when you completed the internship with us at the magazine, describe for our visitors today a little bit about what that process was like, and also why you felt it was important to document this event.
It was a little different because it was entirely online. So I would kind of meet like this every single week and talk with Dr. Harwell and David and the other interns, about what we needed to do. And it was a very surreal experience. I felt like I had a purpose in a way. I was getting this information to tell these people's stories who, without us, they don't have a microphone. So it was really cool to kind of just go through the process together as a team, picking pictures and deciding what's going to look best for the cover and things like that. It's little things that really meant so much, so seeing it in person, having the magazine in my hands, I was like, oh my gosh, like this looks so much better in print, and it just makes it feel all worth it. This is going to be around forever. All of these stories are going to be preserved, and it really makes me feel good because telling these stories are going to make things better for the future, hopefully. I hear what everyone has had to say about their experiences and their homes being gone and their neighborhood suffering. And, all I can do is tell these stories as best as I can in hopes of that changing, because Hurricane Harvey was almost 4 years ago. We're still dealing with the consequences afterwards. So it's very moving still.
Well, you've raised a good point there, and it brings me to my question, my final question that I want to pose to everyone on the panel, and I'll let you all just sort of jump into the conversation, whoever wants to go first, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to answer. And that is, I want to know what you feel like are the lessons that we've learned from Harvey, and how do we take those lessons and use them moving forward to make our communities better? So whoever wants to go first. Rabbi Keller.
Yeah, I'll start. In the Jewish tradition, right, we talk a lot about balance and the golden mean, like most religions do. We believe in a balance of self-care and outreach, right? You have to stay strong. If you're not for yourself, who will be for you? You have to take care of yourself, and we also have a responsibility to take care of others. And we need to do both kind of at the same time. However, there are moments. There are moments when life throws us imbalance. And at those moments, we have to choose, right? Are we gonna have our instinct for self-preservation and self-care, or go out and help others? And my new teacher, James, right, is one of those people that just put his own needs aside and stepped up and helped others. And so I think that's the lesson for me, is a reminder to carry with me that there are moments where we're called upon to sacrifice for others, and that is our calling. And in those moments, to put all our energy into the other. And so I hope to take that with me and teach that lesson.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll go next.
Okay, thank you, James.
Thank you. Well, some of the lessons that I've learned and we've learned within our community is communicating and using technology much more adversely as we did. You know, before Hurricane Harvey, we were trying to teach our senior citizens how to use the computer, because now everything, is, even their Medicaid and everything is all, used with computers. So by the time we got to Hurricane Harvey, a few of them knew how to use their smartphones just a little better. So, and I can say that. So that's one of the things we did learn, is how to use our technology base a little better. And we need to get more acclimated to that, especially our senior citizens. A lot of them had flip phones at that time, if you don't remember, but now most of them have gotten smartphones because of situations such as Hurricane Harvey, and now they're starting to use them. And I would like to advocate more about teaching our senior citizens more how to access that type of technology, because time is of the essence, for communities like mine, where there are more senior citizens here than any other, thing. So that's one of the things that I think that we've learned. And that's also the same thing I believe that will make our communities better, is reaching out, like Rabbi said, helping one another, putting service above self, and also educating ourselves and our senior citizens and our communities as a whole before these situations happen.
You raise a really good point there about senior citizens and being able to communicate. One of the interviews that I did was with Captain Nathan Lilly, who's with the Houston Fire Department. And he told a story about being called to help a senior citizen who needed oxygen. And they thought that, EMS had to respond to all the regular calls in addition to the flooding calls. And they were expecting to go there and just help one person. And when they got there, they found over a dozen people who were in a sort of an unauthorized senior citizen facility / apartment. And loads of people needed help, and nobody knew they were there, and they didn't know how to ask for help. So I think you raise a really good point there about senior citizens in your community, but senior citizens in general, that they frequently don't have the access or the knowledge about how to use technology. And everything's dependent on technology now. Got to call, enter your, get on the list for your COVID vaccine online, and all those sorts of things that are internet or technology driven. Trang and Eric, how about you all?
Yeah, I was listening to Rabbi Teller and Mr. Joseph's comments, and it struck me that in times of loss, we have to be very mindful, I think, of people's dignity and their sense of dignity, because, you know, for many, many families and individuals, the loss was not just about material things, but these are artifacts of their lives. These are milestones for their families and heirlooms. And so it's easy to focus on the material things, thinking they're just things, but they're not. They are truly artifacts of their personal stories. And when we can allow individuals and people to talk about their stories, we're hopefully helping them restore their sense of dignity and sense of control that they have lost through these very, very unfortunate circumstances. I remember after we flooded, one of the things that struck me that I was quite disappointed by, in fact, was the number of people who would say, why don't you just move? You know, put your house on the market and sell already. Why are you still there? At the time, I found the comment or the question very insensitive. And that's something that I think I have really learned very viscerally at this point. The importance of being mindful of people's sense of dignity and respecting them for their decisions, whether you agree with them or not, you know, just be mindful of that dignity that people must have for themselves and their lives.
Good point.
That just reminds me so much of when I went to go volunteer at GRB. I see a question on here. It says, like, what is the way that young adults can help out our community during difficult times? And my partner was a student of Doug Irving, who's very involved in the community and was helped out a lot during Hurricane Harvey. And he got together a group of people to go out volunteering. So that's definitely one way to always give back. There's always something that you can do. During Harvey, there was just a bunch of college students that were desperate to get out of, you know, their dorm because we had been stuck in there for a while with all the rain. So me and my roommates and people from my dorm building just all went and helped out. We volunteered at Lakewood, GRB, and one other place that I'm forgetting. But there's definitely so much that you can do. But being mindful is something that's so important. I was so angry when I went to GRB because there was so many news media people like CNN and things like that who were, you know, filming these people coming off the bus and putting, you know, microphones in people's faces, you know, not, you know, even caring or realizing that these people have gone through a disaster. You know, this was a traumatic event that happened. And I definitely think that we need to change the tone on how we talk to victims and survivors of hurricanes, because there's so much more that we need to do, not only in how we treat them, but how they get help and what, you know, the community can do to step up, because there's definitely a lot of room to do things, you know, there's something for everyone.
Yeah, a lot of different ways to help.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, how about you? Do you want to?
Well, I was thinking that it's probably important to remember to try and prepare. We have, I mean, one of the lessons that we got from this is that we were a little bit more prepared in having and just organize things in the house. Also have a backup plan, and this is very materialistic, but it does help when it does happen. We had a ladder on the side of the house that was ready for us to go onto the roof, thanks to Trang, who wanted me. So that's one aspect. The other aspect I was thinking of is, as much as we are in an information and technology society, we were lucky that the power didn't go down for the cell phone towers, because in a hurricane that can very well happen, and then you don't have technology either. So we must, as much as it's important to be able to navigate that very professionally or proficiently, you've also got to take into account that you may not have it next time. I mean, it could be a hurricane and then all the cell towers will go out. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you must also, that's part of your planning. And then, yes, and then society moves on. The city has moved on. Are there going to be other hurricanes and other floods? Probably, and we'll go through maybe the same process. Incremental improvements, but you've got to prepare.
Dr. David Person, I'm sure you've all become acquainted with in our briefings for COVID-19. He's the public health authority for the city of Houston, as well as the physician director for Houston EMS. And we've interviewed him for a number of our projects, including for this one on Harvey. And one of his sort of sayings, it's in the magazine, and he kind of, I think, takes it from General Eisenhower: the plan is nothing, the planning is everything. And he always says that the disaster doesn't read your plan, but if you haven't done the planning, then you're not going to be prepared for whatever it is the disaster might hand you. And I think that's probably been pretty good advice that he's put into practice to the benefit of all of us here in Houston. I want to turn it over to all of our audience here now, if we can, for the question and answer. I think there are quite a few questions in the chat. And David, if you wouldn't mind, would you like to start with some of those questions for our panelists?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say it's been a great discussion so far. It's been really great to see the different viewpoints and to hear the different experiences with Hurricane Harvey. And I think one of the questions that I'd like to first put out there to all the panelists is just thinking about how vast Hurricane Harvey actually was and who it affected. For example, how do you guys, or how did you guys experience helping people who, for example, were undocumented and perhaps didn't know where to get or to find resources? So did you guys encounter that? And if you did, how did you go about it?
David, I can't say that I encountered it personally, but I'm very aware of the lacking deficiencies, let's say, of the policy structure that we have, infrastructure that we have in the city. I think that in as much as Harvey exposed fragility of individual people's lives through their losses, I think it also exposed the fragility and the deficiencies in our policy making. And we've got to do a better job because, as Sam said, you know, people's losses aren't sound bites. They're not about made for TV content. And so what I would like to do to see be done better is, as far as the communities, undocumented individuals and communities where they don't want the help, we've got to do a better job as a city, as a nation, to change our policies, because we can't keep repeating the same thing and making news headlines only to go back and do the same. And the rhetoric of Houston Strong, while I appreciate it, we're not all strong. We're not all recovered. We are still, many of us, in states of limbo. And so we just have to do a better job as a community, as you know, we have to lean into our leaders, our civic leaders, and our politicians to really call them to task.
Mr. Joseph, I think you were speaking but muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Tran hit the nail on the head. The first thing we must do is change policies. The policies must change. But we did run into, like I said, I'm in a historically Fifth Ward community, and we have it's half and half here. We have a lot of undocumented residents who live within our community. But during Hurricane Harvey, you could not tell who was an undocumented worker and who was an undocumented person and who wasn't when it came to helping out residents in the community when people needed help. That wasn't an issue at all when it came to helping senior citizens and people get off the street. But we did also help some undocumented workers and tried to get them assistance. And some of them we could not get assistance to, but we also had resources that we had other, like Ripley House and other resources that we can send them over to who were already acclimated to working with undocumented workers. So for one, the policies definitely have to change and expand to reach out to more people, you know, because we were here and we were all devastated. Just like the COVID, Hurricane Harvey didn't matter what race, color, creed, sex, or gender you was.
Yeah, sometimes we judge and measure communities by their strengths, you know, by the strongest among us. It would do us some good, and I'm hearing is to measure the value and ethics of a community based on how they treat their most vulnerable. And we need some improvement.
Great point.
Good point.
Could I just add also, as we are part of the University of Houston, that higher education also has a huge responsibility to its students because many of them were affected by the hurricane as they are affected by the pandemic now. And we are slightly behind in terms of our ability to help and support our students across all different socioeconomic levels and different backgrounds. We tend to focus on the strengths, and then we forget that some people, they don't have the resources to rebuild. And many of our students also come from families where they are very much dependent upon. So I just wanted to make note of that because I think it's important, especially that we are in higher education.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great points being made, especially with regard to access to resources. And if we think about sort of the immediate need for resources as opposed to the longer term need for resources, is there any sort of, I guess, experiences that you guys had, either in your personal lives or with those you've encountered regarding, you know, probably mental health issues related to Hurricane Harvey or larger storms or emotional trauma? And how do we go about dealing with that, seeing as though Harvey was so long ago?
Well, one thing that I know that really is really beneficial, like in terms of like immediate help, is that there's a lot of churches that do drives and things like that where you're able to go get food or anything like that. It's very simple. You don't need to show anything that you need the food. It's really, really beneficial for everyone that goes. In terms of just being mentally healthy, I think there's still such a stigma in our society about, you know, getting mental help. And I think the first thing is to talk about it and to at least remind people, you know, that it's okay. You know, I think I saw something on the news maybe last year or 2 years ago, how there's been an uptick in people who identify with PTSD and RAIN, I believe so, in the Houston area. I might be wrong, but I just remembered hearing how rain kind of scares a lot of people. And I was a part of that too. I would get so worried every time, you know, they said there was going to be heavy thunderstorms or something like that. So I think one of the, you know, easiest things that we can do is just be open to listening, you know, being open to realizing, you know, there are so many things that are below the surface that we don't see every day, you know. So just making it, you know, more socially acceptable just to talk about these things and getting help for them, and just knowing that it's not an embarrassing thing. It's not disappointing that you have to get help or that you're not okay after a traumatic event like that. It's normal. I think that that's probably the first step.
Anyone else on your communities about mental health issues or resources for folks?
Yes, well, I'd like to mention a few things about mental health, and when it comes related once again to the disparities, you know, in the community. Um, Mental health, as I see it, where I am, is not being um, addressed appropriately when it comes to street people per se, street people or people who have a mental health issue, and then you come to a community such as Fifth Ward, and you call for a mental health authority, and then they send the police out, and then the whole thing escalates into another issue, and now we have something on the news that shouldn't be there because of mental health issue and not a criminal element. So I say some of the process and the way we're addressing mental health is devastating, because during Hurricane Harvey, like I said, I lost the business, but I remember this certain incident that happened. There was one of my workers who he was artistic, and like she said, when it rains, they get scared. So he ran out of my store. And as he was running out of the store, the cops were passing by, and they were just patrolling the neighborhood just to make sure no one was robbing the store. But when they saw him run out, they thought he was robbing my store. And when I approached the police and they had accosted him, I was saying, no, he's a little artistic, and they were handling him a little rough there, you know. So it was just devastating how the situation was handled, and it was not a criminal issue. It was mental health, and I see it so prevalently in my community where someone is dealing with, or a family member could call someone out to handle a family member who they know has a mental health issue, but the police arrive, and we have another incident that we capture on the news. So once again, I say we need to change some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, a really great aspect of this project is sort of the whole listening aspect of it. You know, I think that goes a long way to helping people to cope with their trauma, but even for it to act as a sort of release for many people. And so, you know, we talk about the state and national relief efforts, but for those sort of inquiring as to what, you know, young adults can do, or perhaps anybody, the power of listening and of sort of comforting people that have been affected by storms such as these, I think, as demonstrated by the Resilient Houston Project, really shows the culture of community that's been cultivated, but also what each of us can do that really doesn't have a cost attached to it except time. And so, as many of you attested, I think that's one important thing to highlight here. Another sort of route I'd like to go is a question posed by Dr. Perales, and it centers on the term resilience. And I think we hear a lot of that, especially from these stories, but also by your guys' experience in helping your neighbors, in getting through the storms yourselves, in rebuilding. There's a lot of resilience there. And so I'm wondering what resilience means to each of you, especially as you reflect back on your experiences.
Maybe I'll start. Yeah, reminds me of a quote from our Jewish tradition: "Don't be like a cedar tree, tall and stiff, be more like a reed by the water, able to be flexible and blow in the wind. And I think the wisdom there is wisdom about resilience, about taking a hit and gathering the internal resources and the external resources to bounce back, right? And some communities we're hearing have those resources in order to bounce back, and some don't. And so, yeah, I think resilience is a really important conversation, and there's an inequity, right? And there's the ability to bounce back, and I'm grateful for this conversation to really hammer that point home. So resilience for me is the ability to be flexible and have the resources, emotionally flexible, but also have the resources to be able to rebuild.
Yeah. I would say resilience to me would mean in my community and amongst my residents is going through the hard pressing times, but continuing to maintain a stable presence, here in the community. Like I said, we could not move out of those homes when we had to stay within, but the resilience came within the spirit and in the heart of the people and in the community. Everything, and especially amongst us, and I say this all the time, money doesn't mean a lot to me. It's much how we stick together, how we come through it, how we come out of it, and how we move forward from here. It's not about how it was, it's about how it can be. So we're resilient in that way, and to try to stay strong as a community, because through the devastations of our community, I tell you, a lot of people still walk around with big smiles on their faces, their chest is stuck out, and the bravado of a Texan, so it's still resilience. We have that type of resilience in our hearts, in our soul, in our faith, and in our hope.
Amen.
Yeah, I think for me, resilience is so interpretive. It's so personal that your sense of resilience is maybe not mine. And I think we have to be very mindful and careful to not make the false equivalence, let's say, to go into a community that you have seen on the exterior has been rebuilt, and not acknowledge the trauma and the sense of loss that still exists behind the physical walls, right? And so, I mentioned it earlier, when after Harvey, the city went on a campaign of talking about Houston Strong, but there were many, many people who did not feel strong. They did not feel resilient because they were still suffering. So
Yeah.
I think that we have to be careful not to make big leaps and interpreting what we see in the physical, the built environment, as a sign of success to be equivalent to a person's emotional state. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I was thinking that there's a bit of a false impression sometimes that when you've rebuilt, you can move on and that's it. And I mentioned that there will probably be other floods, but I think that there is a inherent fragility in the city in general, and that's probably back to more policy making. Have we progressed as a community, as a city? Are we more prepared for the next one? And Mr. Joseph is telling us about certain neighborhoods that have more difficulties. Some are more blessed, luckier, and some have infrastructures that need to be worked upon. And I think that we have to put pressure, or we have to keep on bringing the subject up to policymakers, because it's very easy to forget.
Yes. Agreed.
I think that's probably a really good, all of you guys' definition of resilience is really good. I think just the conversation of making sure that everyone bounces back. You know, I think the points that Trang made just about how not everyone, you know, felt strong and things like that. I think it's important to remember that, you know, not everyone is, you know, the same. Like there are people who have put Harvey in the past, and there are some people who can't, you know, seem to escape it and still have issues from this day. But I would definitely say that it's so important to make sure that we help everyone try to be resilient. Just it was just so devastating to me throughout this whole project just to hear about just all these people who still hadn't been helped, or you know, we know their story, and unfortunately, you know, maybe it hadn't changed much in the past 3 years, but I just think that something that we can all try to push for is the, you know, that silent minority, the people that are still suffering, and just, you know, really pushing, you know, for policy changes and trying to do everything that you possibly can to help. I mean, there's always something that you can do to help someone. So
And perhaps we can maybe elaborate on that point a little bit, Samantha. Uh, you know, especially I think uh, as Eric was mentioning that, you know, a storm here in Houston is quite inevitable in the future, and so knowing that, what sort of resources are available to future victims of future floods that you guys know of and that you would like to share with our listeners, as well as people that may encounter these tragedies?
I think for me, my experience, our experiences with the 3 floods, we were scrambling looking for consistent information. We would go to one meeting, you know, that was hosted by one organization and hear something else from the city at many points. And I know I keep bringing up the city, but it's really important to have a citywide plan or some kind of organization in place because when citizens can't access information and you expect them to go to an email that they don't have because they don't have access to the internet, seems a bit short-sighted, if not disconnected to reality, because their reality doesn't include an email or an internet access, and they can't get to a place that has that kind of access. They can't even leave their homes, right? So that kind of concentrated, organized planning would be helpful. Much of what we learned from the flooding experience came from the Jewish Community Center. Thankfully, they were here and they were closed, and they hosted a lot of events that allowed us to learn. We went on Facebook, of all places. We had to find groups that people put together and they were sharing information.
Floodies.
They were called floodies, yeah. FEMA is a labyrinthian experience in and of itself. So, and then, you know, I'm mindful also of the fact that language barriers are a real thing, and we cannot underestimate that. That alone cuts people off. That access cuts people off very quickly. So those are the things that I reflect upon. And still, as you can see, probably from my responses, it's very deep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also in addition to that, you know, local civic clubs and whatnot, as Rabbi Teller was talking about, you know, even gathering with a group of individuals and you know, thinking about, are you available to help and can you help, and in what ways can you help? and really in what ways online platforms can assist in doing that. I think in such a digital age, it's so, I think, available to a lot of people who didn't directly experience that storm, you know, in ways that are really beneficial to the people who were affected. So I guess Mr. Joseph or Rabbi Teller, could you guys sort of elaborate on perhaps the resources that are available, not only to you know, residents in your communities, but maybe in the broader you know, region or state?
Yeah, I'm most familiar with our Jewish resources. You heard the Jewish Community Center was a neighborhood gathering place for information and resources. And we have a Jewish family service that not only serves the Jewish community, but also the Houston civic community. So those are our go-to resources.
Yeah, some of our resources, like I said, I'm an associate pastor at my church, Lions Unity Baptist Church here in Fifth Ward on lot 3215 Lions Avenue. And we're still doing food drives every 2 weeks. We just had a major food drive just last week. We served over 1,200 families. And I'm needing assistance and product and food and other resources, and mainly volunteers. And we're also, you know, doing other things, COVID testing here, because Fifth Ward was one of the highest rates of COVID within the city of Houston. So we're doing COVID testing, so you can contact me if you need food resources. We still have backpacks for kids. Actually, if you know any kids who still need backpacks, we are a resource. You can contact me. I'm actually also a community engagement consultant. So I'm very acclimated, and I love to help people. That's my calling, helping people.
And we do thank you, everyone, for what you did, especially for the community, and being so selfless in serving in such a difficult time, and even now as well. I guess to get to this question now, and reflecting back on all of your experiences and the ways in which people can help, are there any lessons now that we should all take in preparing for a future storm? So I know flood insurance is obviously one, perhaps being familiar with the procedures of FEMA, but is there anything else, maybe sort of practical advice that you guys would give to those who might go through future devastations?
I think it's a nice opportunity to reach out to neighbors, to get to know the people that live next to you and across the street, and who might one day serve as a safe haven, or you might need them as a safe haven. And so I think reminding ourselves of our civic responsibilities to connect with one another and protect each other. When the pandemic is over, knock on someone's door and introduce yourself and bring over a pie as if you're meeting them for the first time. I think it would go a long way if we just knew each other better.
Yeah, and I'm gonna follow the rabbi with that one. We need to connect with our neighbors more and more. And I always say this: we need to build up our communities, city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, and person by person. You know, and one thing that we have done, and I've asked my senior citizens to do here in my community, is get the door ring bell app. It helps out a lot when we, once again, I'm a hawk on technology, using technology. That way we can get alerts of things that are happening within our community, you know, and when it floods, you know, again, which it will soon, we can be ready instead of being behind the 8 ball. We need to get in front of the 8 ball and also do more planning, you know, because We should have been better prepared for this. Due to all the flooding that we've had before then, we should have been better prepared for this one.
And
Yeah, I would just say never say never. Never think that you would be immune and that you're high enough, because we do live in the bayou, the swamps. So it's not like we live on a mountain. So it would be folly for any of us to think that it couldn't happen to us. It can definitely happen to you, as it has happened to many thousands of people.
And Sam, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the forecasting and how quickly this turned into a major storm that perhaps people weren't prepared for because they did not, either did not take seriously enough, or as Mr. Joseph said, we're sort of behind the 8 ball there.
Yeah, I took my senior capstone class about Hurricane Harvey, and Dr. Romero was my professor. And I basically kind of explored that question, why Houston was unprepared for Harvey. That was kind of like my big paper at the end. So it was so hard to kind of predict all of this rain. I mean, we had an idea of the amount of rain that we were going to get, but the thing was that, I had spoken to a kind of like a weather guru in a way, who has to do a lot of forecasting for his job in the energy industry. And he, along with other meteorologists, just couldn't believe the amount of rain that the Dopplers were saying that we were going to get. And you kind of, I know everyone just kind of couldn't really believe the amount of rain that we were going to get. And when you hear about that much rain coming, what can you possibly do? And I kind of came to my conclusion, like there was no way that we would have been able to do enough, which is disheartening to say. But I mean, the city of Houston prepared as much as it could in such a short time. We needed more time to prepare. We need to have a better preparedness plan. But I think Harvey kind of really set the boundaries on which neighborhoods, flood. I mean, there was a lot of neighborhoods that had never flooded before that flooded for the first time. And neighborhoods that had flooded before, they had never flooded this badly. So I know that that the emergency responders for the city of Houston were really overwhelmed because they didn't anticipate certain areas to have as much rain and to flood as badly as it did. So when you have knowing that, it's kind of hard to, point fingers, because it's, you can point fingers at everyone. But I think the best thing that we can do is kind of what Trang said, like never say never, prepare for the unimpossible. I think 2020 kind of just proved that in every aspect that it possibly could. Who knew that we were going to have a pandemic? I mean, who would have known that we were going to have such a mammoth hurricane like Harvey? And I think definitely what James was saying, that it's going to happen again, and it will. And it's very terrifying, especially for me, who I hate rain. So just knowing that it's inevitable and it will happen. I mean, I live in a home in my backyard that my uncle built. It's very scary to worry, that one day, the water will be up to my ankles. But the best that we can do is to just kind of learn from this experience, with such a huge event like Harvey. The best thing that we can do is to learn from all of the mistakes that happen, learn from everyone's story, try to, push for things to get better in terms of how people get relief and how we prepare and things like that. So there's just so many things that we need to do, but it's just so hard. I wish I had a more optimistic answer, but it was just after so much research, it's just so bumming, like there was nothing we could have done to prepare, and we just have to keep trying our best.
I think that's really an important point. We all know it's going to rain again. We all know Houston will flood again, and we have to think about the different things that we can do as individuals, as communities, to try and improve infrastructure or put pressure on the people who can make a difference to bring change to our communities and hopefully minimize the floods that we'll have in the future. You all have just had an amazing conversation tonight. I cannot thank you enough for taking part, for sharing your experiences with us this evening and in your interviews. And I want to thank all the people who have also joined us this evening in our virtual audience. I saw the list, which was well over 100 people before we started out this evening. And I was really, really excited to see the names of people who have been faithful attendees at our launch events, as well as a whole slew of people whose names I did not recognize, which tells me you're joining us for the first time. I saw names of people who we interviewed. I saw names of students who have been working on this project, who've written articles, people who didn't work on this project, but used to work at the magazine and are graduates. And I'm grateful to every one of you for coming and being a part of this event tonight. I hope that you will check out the magazine. There is a lot more about Harvey in there. We certainly couldn't do everything on Harvey in 48 pages, but we did the best that we could. And you'll find stories there about first responders, more stories about community centers and churches, political action groups, social media, public health, mental health, flood insurance, even pets. They're all there covered in the magazine. And as several of you have pointed out, yes, this magazine is about resilient Houston, but it also throughout, I hope we've gotten that message across too, that there are still neighborhoods and still people out there who are recovering, who have not gotten the opportunity to rebuild yet, and still need our help before the next storm comes. If you like what you saw this evening, I hope that you will support our work, either by subscribing to the magazine or donating to the magazine. And you can learn more about us and donate or subscribe at our website, which is www.houstonhistorymagazine.org. Thank you very much. Please stay safe and stay well. Thank you.